This week, we're very happy to have Dr. Maria Wurzinger presenting for us. Dr. Maria Wurzinger is working at the Department of Animal Science, Iowa State University. She received her master's in animal production and her PhD in animal breeding from Boku University in Austria. She has over 20 years of experience advancing smallholder livestock production across the Global South. Specializing in community-based breeding programs, she has helped transform this approach from a niche concept into an internationally recognized model, enhancing food security and livelihoods for farming families. She thrives on interdisciplinary teams and is dedicated to bridging the gap between social and natural science to help farmers enhance their livelihoods. So I'll turn it over to you now, Dr. Maria, and you can get started.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, thanks for the organizing, for inviting me. It's an honor to give a talk to you today. And I was asked to talk about two species that you are maybe not so familiar with. So I did actually start off working in genetics, working with llamas, llama farmers in Bolivia for my PhD. And since then, I really enjoy these two different types of animals, and we will go a bit into the details what is different between llamas and alpacas. And as you see on my first slide up here, I've put up some photos from llamas and alpacas. So we do a small quiz. So just keep in your record, you don't have to tell me, but keep in mind, think which one of these pictures is a llama and which one is an alpaca. And at the end of my talk, we will hopefully solve the question, which of these ones are llamas and which ones are alpacas. So look at the pictures, think what do you think is a llama and which one is an alpaca. So as you might not be so familiar with all these animals, I would like to start with a brief introduction to these species. Both llamas and alpacas were domesticated around 6,000 years ago. And currently, these are the figures for Peru. There is an estimated number of 800,000 llamas in Peru and officially 4 million alpacas. So obviously, alpacas is much bigger and more important in Peru. When you go to Bolivia, you have more llamas and less alpacas. And we can discuss later on why that is so. According to the Peruvian government statistics, it's about roughly 84,000 families depending on the income from these species. We will see some photos. These alpacas and llamas are raised in very extensive low input systems at very high altitude in the Andes. They are extremely well adapted to that harsh environment with very pronounced dry season and wet season. So you have quite a lot of fluctuation also in feed for the animals. And I call them multi-purpose animals because what you see here on the pictures, so they play an important role in the culture, in the tradition of the Indian families. Especially alpacas are well known for fiber, but also llamas produce fiber. Meat, here this is dried meat, so both animals are consumed in fresh meat and dry meat. Manure is used not only for crop production as a fertilizer, but it's also used as a burning material because consider the high Andes, so there is no forest, no timber production. So instead of using firewood, they burn manure for cooking purposes. Llamas are also used for transport, transporting goods. There's also some tourism evolving around that. And another purpose for keeping animals is like having, we call it a living bank. So if you are in needs of cash, you can sell animals and cover costs for somebody going to hospital, etc. so we have to keep this multi-purpose perspective also in mind when we think about designing breeding programs. Both species are not extensively researched. There's more research, I think, still going on in alpacas than in llamas. So there are quite a lot of research gaps. And for Peru, definitely the market for selling alpaca fiber is very well defined and established. It goes for the export a lot. Basically, all the alpaca fiber produced in Peru is for export to North America, Europe, Japan, for the clothing industry. So this is also why the alpaca sector is a bit better organized than when you compare it to llama farming, or there is quite a lot of informal marketing for selling the meat at local level. So, and it's less structured and organized. Okay. So where do we find these 800,000 llamas and the 4 million alpacas in Peru? I've put up here a map for you where you see this is all of Peru, and you see there is a very thin white yellow strap here. That's the coast of Peru, which is a very dry area. It's basically a desert area with the capital Lima. And then you have this big brown chunk here that's illustrating the high elevation of the Andes. And then you have down here quite a big part of the land is actually lowlands. So this is the Amazon region here. And so when you look where you find alpacas and llamas, so we will talk later on also in the study that I will show about central Andes. So this is up here, this area where you see Huancayo, Junín, Cerro de Pasco. And a very large share of the animals is down here around Puno, Cusco, Arequipa. You see here is the blue, it's the Lake Titicaca, it's going to Bolivia. So this the Altiplano extending here down this region. So along the Andean high elevations, so we talk about 3,800 meters and above, where you find these two types of animals. This is a picture to illustrate a little bit what I mean by pasture-based extensive system. So we have a rainy season and a dry season in the Peruvian Andes, and this is a picture with alpacas grazing in a area which is called bofedales or wetlands. So you see here still some water sources, and this is towards the end of the dry season. So you see vast areas of rangelands, very scarce, high temperature fluctuations. It's kind of a desert climate, so temperature drops below zero during night. It can Celsius during the day, you reach easily 25 or 25 degrees Celsius. So everybody who did a hiking trip once in higher altitude knows how it feels. It's cold and chilly in the morning, and then it's get warm during the day. Sun disappears, its temperature is dropping again. This is another picture to illustrate infrastructure. So what you see here is a stone wall. It's actually a corral, and this is where animals would stay overnight. So before it's getting dark, animals are put together in these corrals, and where they stay close to their homesteads during the night. So there's not a lot of infrastructure. There is no concentrate fed. So it's all what the rangelands offer. This is what llamas and alpacas are consuming. Going a bit more into the details of the animals. So we have in Peru, so I mean, breeder when you talk to scientists, there is still a lot of discussion if we call them types or breeds. In Peru, by law, actually, they are breeds, the different animals. So in Peru, we have officially recognized two different breeds, which is here called the Cara, and here's the Chaco, the woody type. So we have here, it's a very large animal, meat oriented. You see there's not a lot of fleas on that animal. It's, I mean, I've put up here some indications about the size of the animals. And in Peru, at least, this is the most common type that you find. Versus the other one, it's called lanudo, or the woody type, Chaco. You see they are similar, maybe that what you know from sheep or alpaca fiber. They are smaller in size, and the fiber, even though it's limited use are they are used for fiber in meat. And also when you look at the harvest per year is quite low compared to alpaca and sheep. Again, in alpacas, we also have two different breeds according to Peruvian legislation. So Huacaya. So this is, I think, maybe if you have seen alpacas, that's the most, like, also in the US, you find mostly this type of animal. This fiber is, it's a uniform coat. It's similar, I would say, to sheep, even though there are differences in the fiber, versus this Suri animal is very special. You see it here, especially in this brown animal. This is very silky, shiny hair, very long hair. You don't see even here the feet of the animal, which is quite in high demand from the fiber industry, because it has like processing that fiber, it gives a different shiny, very special look for like sweaters, etc. So, but there are the reasons why there are less of these animals. They are looks like less resilient, they can not cope so much with very extreme weather. So this is more the Huacaya type. So what's going on in terms of breeding in Peru? So there is no national breeding program, neither for llamas nor for alpacas. There is also not really a regional breeding program. There are many discussions going on if that should be established and how should that be done. You see, especially in the alpaca sector, that there are some quite advanced farmers that do recording, selection, etc. There's a bit more of organization, but still very limited. Llama farming is really also like farmers keep llamas very often as not as their main livestock, but they keep them as a kind of backup so if they have very marginal lands, they put llamas there because they can still use that land. So there is less focus on llamas in Peru. And all of you being animal breeders, implementing breeding programs, breeding strategies depends on a lot of factors to make them a success. And one big success, especially when we talk about engaging with a lot of smallholder farmers, supporting them in doing breeding, is looking at the readiness of farmers, or the acceptance of farmers actually willing, interested in breeding. And so in my talk, I will talk about a little bit about this readiness and how you can actually measure this attitude of farmers towards breeding tools. So what we did in our study, we did online surveys in Peru because that was still done at the end of the pandemic. So traveling was not really possible. So we said, okay, let's see if we can reach farmers with WhatsApp groups, email lists, sending out text messages to farmers, and asked people also to forward their information to other farmers. So we did this snowball sampling. You send your information to one person you know and ask them to forward the information. So we had then some very brief questions on what they are currently doing, and then we had 11 statements to assess the attitudes to breeding, and that was based on a study done by Martin Collado and his colleagues, where they developed this methodology. We got replies from llama. So we did one survey for llama farmers and one for the alpacas, and we got quite some feedback and fully answered questionnaires. But what you will see here immediately, this is definitely a biased sample that we got. So here, when we look at the llama farmers, as I talked about, there are the central Andes and the southern region next to bordering Bolivia. We have quite a lot of young people, and when you look at education, we have a lot of universities. So many of the students actually are like, these are very often students that are at the university doing an undergrad study, but having a livestock background, like that their family have a farm at home. But yeah, we definitely have to acknowledge that this is definitely a biased sample, because we have a lot of, so to speak, trained people in our sample that is not reflecting maybe the average farmer. What you also can see here is, like, being a full-time livestock farmer, it varies a bit across regions. So in quite a lot of cases, you have part-time farmers maybe going to mining industry, which is very strong in Peru, and complement the income with livestock production. We have the same picture here for the alpaca farmers. So when we interpret our data, keep in mind that we might overestimate the readiness of farmers, as we have quite a lot of university students also in our sample. So what are farmers doing? So we asked them, I'm just presenting the information on breeding strategies. We asked them, do you use embryo transfer? We know embryo transfer is available for llamas and alpacas. It's not at a commercial stage yet. So we do see farmers doing it, but this is experimental. Some had experienced parentage testing, like testing if the male is actually the male that is on the record. Again, artificial insemination is basically, we are not close to having it on a commercial scale. There are quite a lot of difficulties in freezing the semen, collecting the semen. Alpacas and llamas, you might know, are so-called induced ovulators. That means actually during the mating, actually the females are ovulating. So it's also a question how good AI is actually working. But yeah, some farmers had experience with that one. A lot do controlled mating. What does that mean? They have, even though they might have larger herds, they check which male is mating with which female, so they have a close follow-up on that one. Many people, I was surprised, record performance. We don't know specifically what they record. So in alpacas, you would record fiber quality traits, fleece weights, etc. Maybe birth, etc. So we don't know exactly what's behind that one, but that was quite a high number. And even quite some farmers claimed that they record pedigree information. So as artificial insemination is not really an option for the farmers so far, so basically what they rely on is on natural mating, and so therefore we were interested, where they source their breeding males. So females are basically used for reproduction, like replacing their own within their own herd, so they get males also from their own herd. So here it's a question also about like, how do you deal with inbreeding? There are different ways of how you get a breeding male from. You can borrow it from other farmers. Some people exchange. I give you my male, you give me your male for one season. And the largest share of farmers actually go out, purchase animals from different farmers, or here you see they are combining different ways of obtaining males. We also ask them if they are actually currently in an association, not necessarily a farmers, like a breeders association, but more like cooperatives, also for like selling livestock products together. So there were also quite, the majority of the farmers were not in any form of association. And then we come to these famous attitude questions, or so how does that work? I said we have 11 statements, and let's have a look at the first one. It says, important to maintain type. So we stated in our questionnaire, it is important to maintain the type of the animal. So for llamas, remember we had the Cara and the Chaco type, so the meat type versus the fleece type. And in alpacas, we have the Huacaya and the Suri with the silky fiber. And then farmers could say, I fully agree with that statement, or I completely disagree, or I don't know. Don't have an answer to that question. So what we looked at first is keeping the types as they are. And so we had two questions related to that. One, we said, okay, it is important to maintain the type. And there was quite a lot of agreement that, yes, it is important to keep the types separate. We also asked them, avoid crossbreeding of types. And there is also like the same agreement, yes. So if it's agreeing that we should not cross animals. So they would like to keep their animals separately in the different types, because they also have, especially for the alpaca, different market. And it's also, they do not want to cross llamas with alpacas, which is also possible. And they also produce fertile offspring. So that was also not liked by farmers. Then we asked questions related, or statements related to recording. So we said, okay, phenotypes is sufficient to indicate the performance, and yeah, somehow disagree. Farmers were not so saying, okay, it's not just enough to look at the animal. We also had a question like, performance records are not needed, and there was a disagreement on that one, saying yes, records are needed. Then we also asked phenotype more important in production. There was also a disagreement. So reproduction is an important value for farmers. We also tried to ask about genomics and other, like, yeah, we had the question on genomic information. There was a high agreement, but we are not so sure if everybody understood the same thing when we talk about genomics, what it actually could do. But here, for example, for reproduction technologies are not useful. There was quite a lot of disagreement. So yes, they would like to see reproduction technologies as a supporting instrument for improving breeding. And then what we also asked, the last three questions are, intra-herd comparison is important. So these questions and exchange of animals is important, and membership is important. These three questions are thought of being an indicator of how open are farmers to cooperate and exchange animals, because, as I said, like, this is a the breeding program is based on natural mating, so we rely heavily on exchanging live animals if we would like to establish a breeding program. And if farmers are not willing to do so, it will be very hard to actually implement such a breeding program. So there was quite a lot of agreement that yes, intra-herd comparison is important, exchange of breeding animals is important, and membership can also support breeding activities. So coming to my conclusions for this talk, current use of technologies did not differ between the alpaca and llama farmers. Performance recordings seem positive, and it seems some of the farmers already implement that, even though we don't know exactly to which extent and how accurate and how frequently they record data, but it's something that they are familiar with, and to some extent already doing that one. So what they do, farmers might record on their farm, but there is no joint how to say database where you have all the data from different farms there. So again, thinking of implementing a breeding program where you would have to share data for analyzing data, we are not there yet. So I think one of the challenges, especially for the alpaca farmers, is that some have quite established programs for their larger herds. And the question is, are they willing to accept and share actually that database with other farmers? We saw a very positive attitude towards exchange of breeding maize because and that reflects what they're already doing at the moment. So what we are currently doing actually in Peru, we have a PhD student working there looking into more details of breeding practices of llama farmers. And so we ask actually farmers where they get their animals from, which region. And it is surprising how far actually farmers travel to get breeding stock. So they actually there's quite a lot of exchange of animals going from the central Andes of Peru to the southern region of Peru. Yeah, and even though they are maybe not members of an association yet, farmers seem to be interested and see it as a positive venue for them to become member of an association, and that would also help us in going for a breeding program, because a lot breeding programs in that case really rely on the willingness of farmers to collaborate and work together on a common goal. So it looks quite positive what we see. A general openness towards different breeding tools, new technologies. Also from my own experience talking to farmers, they are always very keen and interested to learn and see what is going on. So many of the farmers also have, maybe some of them have cattle on their own, but so they are also in exchange with farmers and know what's going on in the dairy sector. So they see also what kind of tools are available and would like to apply that one to their own livestock. So coming now back to my question at the beginning. So you will see here I hope you can see the results of, okay, yes. So I don't know who was voting with me. I hope you managed to identify llamas. You see them here. They have this more naked head with longer ears. The alpacas having shorter ears. This is also a llama, even though it's quite a lot of hair on the face. This alpaca is just ready to spit because it has the ears already back. So then you should be careful when the alpaca looks at you like this. And this is the last picture here also illustrates the traditional way of marking animals. So this gives an identification of who is the owner, but it's not an identification of the individual animal that you would see actually on this animal. But again, tagging is nothing common in Peru. And very often, like this, maybe is a tag from a specific farmer, but there is no, so this number might appear in another farm with the same, like there are similar tags with the same numbers in different herds. So there's no national system of tracing these animals. So that's getting started with a breeding program and knowing how to identify animals. That is the first step, so that we have to overcome and make sure that farmers are willing to identify actually their animals. Yes, and this was a very quick look into what's going on in the llama and alpaca industry in Peru and Bolivia. Here you have another picture of how animals are marked on the farm. And with that, looking forward to some of your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Maria, for your presentation. I would like now to open the floor for any questions, either from people here in the room or from those joining us online. Okay, I can get started then. Are there any existing genomic resource, such like as SNP panels for alpacas and llamas?
There is one for alpacas. There's a SNP panel. It was developed by a Peruvian group together with colleagues from the US. And as far as I know, there is nothing for llamas.
Mm.
And no, there is a chip that the Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna developed for camelids in general. So, but it's more for camels. I think they tested it also for llamas.
Okay. And what is the density of the panel?
or I don't know.
No problem.
I'm not so much in the genomics.
Are the I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce the name properly. Are the cara better at adapting to the hot climates due to less fiber?
Good question. You see, I mean, it's less fiber, but it's still quite dense. So you have to shear them in during summer. Like in Europe and in the US, you have to shear them because the hot weather is not the best for them. But I don't know if there are differences in this different types of llamas. I assume the longer the hair, it's more difficult. So annual shearing should be done anyway.
Okay, thank you. Please, Gabby.
Thank you for a great presentation. I kind of have a two-in-one question. I was just wondering the average flock size and what the breakdown of males to female are, and if the producers are typically using their own males for breeding, how high would the inbreeding be, and is this a problem that you see within the different herds?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I realized giving the talk that I missed I missed the question on how on the data on herd sizes. For llamas, we have maybe it starts with about 20 llamas, can go up to maybe 100. When I was working in Bolivia, they had even herd sizes maybe up to 200 animals. So in Peru, I think they are smaller, the herd sizes. And in alpaca, again, you have very small farmers with maybe 50 alpacas, but that would not be a full-time alpaca farmer, or it's very, like, really poor. Then you're like, but you have farms with 400 animals, 500 animals. What is very unique in Peru is they also have quite a lot cooperatives, but where they keep the animals together, and there you can have larger herd sizes to a few thousand animals. And actually the biggest alpaca farm owned by farmers is in Peru, and I think they have more than 20,000 female alpaca. So there's a big range in size of herds, and usually you see the larger the herds are, there's also more better management, because then it's also more important for the family income. We see also like families merging herds, so that you have maybe one herd, but it's managed as one herd, but actually the owners, maybe the father, the son, and the daughter, but she's living in the city, and somebody on the farm takes care of the animals. So we see that now coming up. It's like female male ratio. It's recommended to have one male per 20 to 25 females. So, and when you have the larger herds, then usually what you also see is that they split up in smaller groups, so they can be managed on pasture in different groups. So you would not have all the 700 animals together. And what you still see a lot, so you don't see a lot of fences. So it's very often that actually a person actually is going out with the animals, do the herding. Very often females, the women of the household, very often with the kids, spend the time out with the animals. Yeah, farmers source breeding males from different places. There's no how big the problem of inbreeding is. I know they did a study with a few farms. I can't remember exactly the inbreeding level, but it was not very high. Sometimes you see genetic defects, like when they get very short ears or they have blue eyes. There are some, but what usually farmers then don't use these animals for breeding. They go for meat production.
Thank you. We have a question here in the room.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was really nice to hear about something so different. I was here wondering if there is any worry about genetic diversity, because there is the whole historical, cultural part. Is not a breed that it's kind of a wild breed they use for production and everything, but it's not like cattle that everybody's raising them and having them everywhere in the world.
The issue is, it's like I said, there's not a lot of funding or research going into that one. So you might see a genetic diversity study on alpacas in one specific region of the country. But there's no diversity study done across the whole range of where animals are kept. So we are at the moment in the process of trying to cover as many places as possible in Peru for the llamas to get a picture of the genetic diversity. And also, like, we took samples, but it's also like going out and taking samples means a lot of effort. It's like driving for hours. Like, we went to see one farmers. We were sitting 5 hours in a pickup just to get to one single farmer and to collect 5 samples from this farm. So it's a very expensive field work actually to get good data. And so therefore I think it's also that we don't know a lot about the genetic diversity. So at the moment we try to do with the llama study is like taking samples and for genotyping, and in addition we do all these interviews with farmers, try to understand how far do they go, what to identify specific regions where they get animals from, and so on. So it's trying to put different strategies together to get a better picture what's going on. I hope I could answer your question.
Yeah, no, yeah, you did it.
Yeah.
I imagine
Yeah.
how hard it must be. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have 2 questions in the chat. I don't know if you can check or I can
Yes.
read for you.
Alpaca population in the US and breeding programs. Okay. I can say a little bit. I was just looking at the census of 2022 in the US, and they claim in the official records there are roughly 100,000 alpacas on about 8,000 something farms. And I was talking to a colleague at Colorado State University who does the genetic evaluation for the Alpaca Owners Association here in the US. And he confirmed what I thought is like the official data obviously underestimates what is the real number, because he has in his database more animals, even though not all alpacas and all farmers that are registered at the Alpaca Owners Association take part in the genetic evaluation. So that is a problem across the globe, that no country knows how many alpacas they actually have. So it's in Peru, it's an estimate, but also I come from Europe. So when you talk, there are some official statistics in Europe. For example, in Austria, we record llamas and alpacas together, and there are some guesstimates about 10,000 animals. People from Germany claim there are about 100,000 animals in Germany. So I found the alpaca population in the US with only 100,000 quite low, the number. But as quite a lot of people keep them more as a hobby. They don't necessarily report that they are owners of alpacas. So that is a big challenge that the recording is not there. So indirectly answer, yes, there is a breeding program. The Alpaca Owner Association, they do genetic evaluation of different traits of fleece quality. So farmers are provided with EBDs for their animals and so on.
Thank you. Any questions online in the room? We do have a question in the room. Just 1 second.
Yeah. Oh, hi. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, when the animals are sheared, if they were not to be sheared, would that result in them suffering from heat stress? And if they did suffer from heat stress, would that result in impacting their meat production?
I know that llamas are not shorn annually. Very often farmers don't shear them, even though they might have longer fiber, because there is no market for. So the shearing costs can be even higher than what the revenue that you would get from selling your fiber. So llama fiber is in quality usually less, is not so good in quality like alpacas. So farmers are not really interested in shearing because they don't know what to do with the fiber. How much that impacts meat quality? I don't think a lot, because like as long as the biggest growth period is when they are still young, and there is not a,
Okay.
so you would not shear them when they are very young. But I think there's not so much this concept of producing meat. Like we have okay, we have to see that animals are growing fast so that we make them ready for the market quickly. So it's more like, okay, depending also on the pasture quality, when the animal is ready, I sell it. Or I sell it when there's a need that I need cash.
I see. And it's the same thing for the alpacas, just because they're a bit more hairy. I assume that they would suffer a bit more if they weren't sheared.
They suffer maybe a bit more. But I mean, what we tried once, like the alpaca, like the fiber, the fleece is then also like a bit of like an isolation. We took like body temperature on the outside of the fleece during a hot day with a lot of sunshine. And when you open the fleece and you measure the temperature on the skin, that's like yeah, they don't suffer that much because it's like kind of an isolation. And when you look at the alpaca, in the llamas, you see also they have some spots where they have less fiber. So to make sure that they also can like have a better ventilation and so on, so I suffer less from heat, and they cool off during the winter. So the other thing is, like, talking about physiology, they are similar to camels. So llamas and alpacas, they are the South American camelids. So they are relatives. So they are relatives to the camels that we know from the desert in Africa and Asia. So they are actually, their ancestors are coming from North America. So one branch went down to South America and the others went to Asia. And what you see in physiology, in adaptation, camels and also alpacas and llamas have a much broader range of body temperature that's acceptable for them without having any problems. So we would have already fever, but for llama, it's still okay having a much higher body temperature. So they accept much more fluctuation. So they are adapted to this hot during the day, cold during the night. So this is also how they manage this hot temperature during the day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
I do have one question. Are farmers strictly recording production traits, or are they interested in disease resistance or other health traits?
We did ask some time back, I did a study also with Bolivian llama farmers. We asked them what they record. So they are interested in production traits. They also would like to see animals resistant, but they don't explicitly always state that. So they often phrase it more in like, I would like to have an animal that thrives in the harsh environment, that is surviving. So they might not explicitly say, I need an animal that is disease resistant. But even though, I mean, we have internal parasites, we have external parasites, especially during the wet season, that becomes an issue, having more parasite problems.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, but it doesn't seem to bother too much farmers at the moment.
I see. Thank you. Any other questions in person or online? No, I might have some here. Let me go through my questions. You mentioned that normally the phenotypes that they record are the weight, the fiber. Is there any other? I don't know if I've misunderstood
Yeah,
that.
so in alpaca, it's a lot on looking into fiber, fiber quality, or flea. It would be ideal to have fleece weight, but farmers, like during the shearing period, you could measure the fleece weight. But it's also a very busy time, so farmers very often don't like to record during that time, a lot of doing extra work. So the industry would like to have very fine fiber, very uniform fleece, uniform coat color, as uniform as possible. And farmers say, okay, but you pay me for the weight, the volume. So they are more interested sometimes in saying, okay, I would like to have more fleece on my animal. I'm not so much interested in the quality. We see now shifts in the pricing scheme, that high quality is also, there's an incentive for farmers getting a better price for top quality. So because and the issue is, it's an antagonistic trait. Fiber quality, so the finer the fleece, you have a lower quantity. So now what we are now trying to find is combine fleece weight and quality in one way, how to improve them simultaneously. So that would be the perfect idea, would be to have a super alpaca with very fine fiber and a lot of it.
Okay. Thank
So
you
it's
so much.
challenging for breeders.
Yes, I can imagine. Any other questions in person or online? No? So thank you very much, Dr. Maria, for your presentation. Now, we're going to close the meeting, and the record will be posted on YouTube, and I will send more details about that for you later. And thank you again for presenting for us today. It was really nice.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye. You too. Nice weekend.